On March 10, 1906, the earth beneath northern France exploded, and 1,100 men never came home. But the true horror wasn't the blast, it was what the company did next. They sealed the mine, while survivors were still breathing in the dark below. This is the story of Courrières, Europe's deadliest mining disaster, and one of history's darkest days. A day most of the world has quietly forgotten. The coalfields of the Pas-de-Calais were the beating black heart of industrial France. Nearly 2,000 men and boys, some as young as 13, descended into the Courrières pits every morning before dawn. They worked in tunnels so hot the air shimmered, in galleries laced with coal dust so fine it hung suspended like fog. The miners knew that dust was dangerous. The company knew it too. Days before the disaster, a fire had been detected smoldering deep in one of the seams. Management's solution was not to evacuate, it was to wall the fire off and keep digging. The coal quota came first. At 6:34 in the morning, that decision detonated. A wave of flame tore through over 100 kilometers of underground galleries in seconds. On the surface, a lift cage weighing tons was blown clean out of the shaft like a cork from a bottle. Windows shattered in villages miles away. Below ground, men were incinerated where they stood. Others survived the blast, only to meet something the miners called Le Grisou's cruel twin, afterdamp, an invisible, odorless tide of carbon monoxide creeping through the tunnels, dropping men mid-stride. 1,099 dead. Entire villages lost every working-age man in a single morning. In the town of Méricourt, they say the church bells rang for the dead for 3 days without stopping. But here is where Courrières stops being a tragedy and becomes something darker. Within days, rescue efforts slowed. German mine rescue teams, equipped with breathing apparatus the French didn't have, pulled bodies from the smoke, but the company's engineers made a calculation. The fire was still burning. Fire consumes coal. Coal is money. And so, barely a week after the explosion, sections of the mine were closed off and ventilation was reversed to smother the flames and preserve the seams. The official position was simple. No one could still be alive down there. They were wrong. 20 days after the explosion, 20 days, 13 men staggered out of the darkness. They had survived in a black labyrinth with no light, eating the rotting feet of dead pit horses, drinking water that seeped through rock, and eventually, the horses themselves. They navigated by touch, following rails with their fingertips, past the bodies of friends they could not see, only smell. One of them, a man named Henri Nenny, later said the worst part was not the hunger, it was the silence, and then, worse than the silence, the sounds. Because for the first days they could hear other trapped men, tapping, calling, and then, one by one, the tapping stopped. 4 days after those 13 emerged, one more survivor crawled out alone. His name was Auguste Berthoud. 24 days underground. He had outlived everyone around him in absolute darkness. When France learned that men had been alive behind the walls the company sealed, that the rescue had been scaled back to protect profit, the coalfields erupted. 40,000 miners went on strike. The government sent 20,000 soldiers to occupy the mining villages. Grief curdled into rage, and rage into one of the largest labor uprisings in French history. The disaster forced the creation of professional mine rescue services and helped birth the safety regulations that miners across Europe would work under for the next century, regulations written, quite literally, in the ash of 1,100 men. And yet, ask almost anyone today about Courrières, and you'll get a blank stare. History remembers the Titanic 6 years later with a fraction more dead. It does not remember the morning an entire region of France was widowed before breakfast, or the men who tapped on the rock waiting for a rescue that had been canceled by accountants. The pits at Courrières kept operating until 1990. Somewhere beneath that quiet farmland and galleries never reopened, hundreds of the dead remain exactly where the afterdamp found them. The ground above grows wheat now, the dark below keeps its own. If stories like this, the forgotten catastrophes, the days history chose to bury, Belong on your screen, subscribe to Obscura, and turn on notifications. Next time we descend somewhere history would prefer you didn't look. Until then, mind the dark.